All right, so some just quick housekeeping as we get started. So since we are recording the session today, I'm going to ask that you send all of your questions in the chat and we will read them at the end. If it is relevant, we'll try to keep an eye on the chat as we go. If it's relevant to something we're talking about at that moment, we'll try to read it out loud. If you can send them to Roshni, who I'll introduce in a second, you'll see her on the participant list. She'll be reading all of the questions at the end. All right, so your team, on the phone today. Speaking, I'm Jane Cardale. I am a principal and founder of CastleBridge Consulting. Been in the Oracle HCM world for longer than I care to admit, about 15 years now. Been implementing cloud since day one, and my specialty is really talking about strategy across all modules. However, I've had the privilege of running many open enrollments, both in my time before becoming a consultant and so that is why I will be doing the bulk of the speaking today to really try to give you some best practices. On with me today, I also have Roshni. Roshni, will you introduce yourself? And Roshni, if you're on mute, can you take yourself on mute, off mute rather? All right, Roshni, if you can work on your audio, it seems like we can't hear you. But Roshni is a senior consultant with us. Her expertise is in benefits. She's run numerous open enrollments as well, and really is our go-to expert internally for all things open enrollment, plan configuration, and best practices. So we'll work on her audio, but hopefully you'll be able to hear from her in a little while. All right. All right, so as we talk about open enrollment, there's a few different angles that we're going to discuss. So clearly the most important thing, of course, is your configuration. However, since Oracle themselves give you so much support in this area, or you may be working with us or another consulting team, we're not really going to talk in depth about plan configuration. We're going to talk about the process, planning for open enrollment, and we're really going to talk about 4 areas of focus. Those areas are planning, preparing, executing, and optimizing. So as we plan, how do we set up our project plan and our checklist? Preparing, how do we clean our life events and our data, make sure that our plan documents are updated, that our vendor guides are available? How do we execute an open enrollment from best practices for auditing and enrollment reports, clearing out problematic life events, creating backups? And then how do we optimize? How do we look at if you did an open enrollment last year, what went well, what didn't? How do we uptake some of the new features that Oracle's released, such as notifications and email reminders? And then how do we make sure that the experience is smooth for both our employees from an enrollment perspective and our HR folks from an implementation perspective? So we're going to focus on those 4 areas today. So
Hi, Jane. This is Roshni here.
Perfect. Thank you,
I just got
Roshni.
so there was a problem.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm sure you heard I did your introduction, but if there's anything you want to add, please feel free. Okay, so again, as a reminder, you'll see Roshni on the participant list. Please direct message her questions to you if you have any as we go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about planning. And hold on one second. Let me see if I can get rid of this gray box in the middle of the screen. All right, Larry, if you could just let me know if that's better. Hopefully that got rid of the gray box. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about planning and really about estimating the amount of time we need to back up from our open enrollment window and how to even determine what that window is. And I know we have a variety of clients and some other people on the phone today. Some of you may be going through your first cloud open enrollment and some may be going through more than your first, second, third, etc. So I'm going to try to speak to both audiences. If you know all this, please feel free to just listen lightly. All right, so the most important thing in determining our timeline is estimating the complexity of our open enrollment changes for this year. And when we talk about this, we're really thinking about 3 different levels of complexity: simple, moderate, and more complex. So a simple complexity that will take you the least amount of time is going to be just flat rate updates across your plans. Your vendors have not changed, your plan design has not changed. All you're doing is rate updates. Perhaps you're dropping a plan. That's always easier than adding a plan. And you just need to make some self-service verbiage changes to your confirmation statements and to your enrollment enrollments. Very, very simple, just updating what already is, no plan changes whatsoever. That, of course, is going to require the least amount of time in configuration and in doing a mock enrollment and in executing. Your mid-level, of course, is a little bit more moderate. This is when you are making different updates across age and salary bands for your plan configuration. If you have evidence of insurability limit changes, and also if you're doing different types of self-service groupings as opposed to what you've done in previous years. So this would fall into a little bit of a more moderate plan change. Again, no real new plans, no major changes, but we're going to back that window up even further. And last but not least, complex. So this is where you have changed vendors or perhaps you have new plans completely. If you are changing your plan dependencies where it will need to reevaluate your enrollments, that will fall under complex. If you've done acquisitions and mergers throughout the year or your business has significantly restructured, that may have impact on your benefits as well. And of course, vendor changes, not only because of the new plan design, but because of the need to create vendor files to go to those vendors. So that technical development tends to back you up even further. So it's important to decide where your open enrollment for this window is going to fall in order to plan appropriately. Which brings us to our next step, everyone's favorite, the project plan creation. So as we talk about plan complexity, we'll want to think about typical timeframes. The timeframes I will show you are really more pure system. There are a lot of things that can affect this. We always recommend giving yourself as big of a window as possible. Your simple configuration might take just simple 4 weeks. It's not a lot of changes. You get your rates uploaded, you do your mock, and you can be open in open enrollment in 4 weeks. Moderate, you might need another 2 weeks. Complex, you can need 10 weeks or possibly more, depending on the amount of new vendors, new files, etc. So take these timelines with a grain of salt just to show you how a simple versus complex plan change might look and feel in terms of timeline. It really is about your organization, about the support you have internally, the technical resources you might have available. So take these with a little bit of a grain of salt and apply it to your particular culture. Next, we'll want to think about our open enrollment date. So for many of you, this might already be determined. Typically, we're going to see an October, November timeframe for our open enrollment, usually more in the October time. But to determine those windows, you'll want to think about a few different things. The first, obviously most important, is your specific vendor requirements. So most of your vendors will, if they haven't already, start reaching out to you to talk about open enrollment and saying in order to produce cards and get everybody enrolled by 1/1, we need to receive the latest plan file by X date. From that date, knowing your own timeline for opening and closing your open enrollment window, you can then back up to when you need to start and how long you need to hold it open for your population. You'll also want to take into account your organizational activities. So obviously this is getting into year end for HR. Hard to believe we're talking about that already. But as we're talking about, say, performance planning or compensation cycles, year end sales bonus payouts, payroll runs, you'll want to think about the capacity for your own HR team, your own internal resources in order to determine the best windows for that open enrollment period. And then you'll also want to identify your resources for your project plan, of course. So who will actually be running the open enrollment? Who will be receiving calls from employees? How will you support them? Who will be running the backups? Who will actually be doing the configuration? If you're lucky enough to have that person internally, making sure that person has the right training and support, or if you're working with a consulting companies such as CastleBridge for our support clients, you'll want to make sure that you have those initial discussions with your consulting resources now. And last but not least, you'll want to identify any training and support needs. So again, Oracle themselves have excellent learning topics on configuring and running an open enrollment. You, of course, can partner with us or other resources to make sure that your team is fully trained and ready to run your open enrollment. And then think about in terms of your capacity. So I know right now, especially in these crazy times, we're all stretched very thin, we're working remotely, we're all adapting to a different way of work. If you think you'll need more support during open enrollment because of the changes we've all gone through in the business world, you'll want to plan for that now. All right, let's talk about the next step, which is really about preparing and getting started. So now that we've got our dates, we know our plan complexity, we have a rough idea of when we need to start and when we need to do our mock open and when we need to do our actual open, we're going to talk about preparing. So another important date to keep in mind, of course, is your instance refresh plan. So your instance refresh, you'll want to take a P to T. Oracle themselves are going to drive some of the timing for this. They need at least 3 to 4 weeks for non-emergency P to T requests. However, big caveat on that, open enrollment is a very common time to look for P to Ts. And of course, we want to make sure that Oracle has the capacity to support all clients. So I recommend giving Oracle as much of a heads up of when you're looking for a PT as possible. Clearly, you want this close enough to the window to still have value to you where the data is pretty correct from your production system. You don't want to do it now, for example, but close enough. So close enough that the data is still good, but far enough apart that you can have plenty of time to do your particular configuration, get your rate updates in, etc. So again, make sure you reach out to Oracle to schedule a P to T at least a month in advance of when you'll need it. And for those of you going through your first open enrollment, hopefully you'll know this, you'll always want to configure it in a non-production instance so that you can do any rate uploads, tests, do a mock open, and then of course you would configure it directly in production. All right, so reviewing your requirements and your due dates, think about if you're running an active or a passive open enrollment this year. Typically, if you've run an open enrollment or you've gone live on benefits, you're typically going to do a passive open where most of your plans will default except for your FSA and HSA savings accounts. Those always will require an active enrollment. But if you're requiring an active enrollment, that might need a little bit more time depending on the size of your population. Typically, if you're putting in new vendors or doing significant plan designs where it would not be easy to default people to an existing plan, you'll want to think about an active enrollment. And then you'll also want to think about any risks that you might have that might impact your timeline, such as late requirements and how you'll handle those. You'll also want to think about any self-service guides and plan summary documents. So depending on the culture of your organization, especially with more and more of the workforce working remote these days, you might have fewer ability to, say, pass out materials or give them open enrollment guides. Perhaps those now need to be sent to homes, or perhaps you need video guidance or some sort of online learning. So you'll need time, obviously, to plan and execute that. So think about that, put that in your project plan to make sure that your employees have the right FAQs, plan summary documents, comparison charts, however you normally support them for open enrollment. Make sure that that is also part of the project plan. And then think about your communications and your notifications. So there are a few new things that we'll talk about in a little bit that have come out this year. You do have the ability to set up seated alerts. They are available out of the box, but you do need to configure them. You might need email enrollment reminders for life events, confirmation statements for employees that have submitted their elections, emails saying that a document has been approved or rejected and further follow-up actions. So requiring those template or defining those template requirements and the content and planning for that does need to be included in your project plan. And then everybody's favorite, we do want to take a hard look at our data. So if I could tell you one thing that tends to hold up open enrollment, well, there are a few, but this is one of the big ones. It really all is about data cleanliness, making sure that you don't have any showstoppers that are hanging out there. This really should be an ongoing process if you're not already doing this as sort of keeping the health of your benefits system up to date. This is a good time to start. The most common ones we see are pending evidence of insurabilities, for example, certificates that are pending approvals, miscellaneous action items, a life event stuck in potential status, and then beneficiary percentages that are not equal to 100. Those things will cause issues when you try to run your open enrollment life event. And rather than dealing with it then when it might be a bit of a fire drill, you'll want to make sure that you're cleaning those out. It's a good idea to clean that in both. It's a really great idea to clean that prior to your P2T. Otherwise, you need to clean that in both of your instances in order to have a smooth open enrollment. So it's never too early to start thinking about that. And along with data, you'll want to think about demographic data. And we'll talk a little bit about this too, but have employees moved? Have they kept their dependents up to date? Those are things that they can look at doing now. All right, and then third step is the actual execution of our open enrollment. So let's talk about the plan and the checklist. And we have templates for both of these for those of you who are our support clients. So you'll want to make sure that you're following your project plan, whether you're having daily meetings, weekly meetings, and then of course your actual checklist. There are a number of different activities that are happening around open enrollment that you'll want to track. And it is very easy to lose track of them, especially across multiple teams. So make sure that you've extensively planned, created that checklist, assigned resources to it, and that someone is managing that from a project perspective. You'll want to conduct a thorough mock open enrollment, and this is another area where we often see clients fall down. It is very tempting to create a mock open enrollment on just a subset of employees, and while there's technically nothing wrong with that, we do tend to pick just subconsciously the people that we know will be successful. What we want to do is ferret out the gotchas, the people that we didn't know had an errored life event, or perhaps have messy situations with dependents. You'll always want to make sure that you create a list of people to check, but run your mock open enrollment on everyone, right? So we always say check your executives, check your other HR folks, check people in different types of plans and configurations. And you'll really want to enlist people to help with that mock open enrollment. We tend to recommend that HRS or HRIT gets in there about a week ahead of time before the actual enrollment, just that they themselves can get an early testing window, get their enrollments out of the way. But they should also be very heavily involved in your mock enrollment as well. Okay. One more thing to just talk about for open enrollment, and I didn't put a bullet on here, your rate updates. So as you go through your mock open enrollment, this is probably the biggest area we see systems fall down. Those rate updates can be very tricky with the spreadsheet loader, with or without, really. If you get the dates wrong or you get the amounts wrong, it's very complicated to back it out, rerun it, etc. So it's a good idea to take your time with that, and your mock open enrollment is a really good place to make sure that you got that right. All right, handling your intervening life events. So these are your qualifying life events or your new hires that happen during or after open enrollment. Obviously, you'll want to have this as part of your project plan. Typically, this is going to require manual intervention. And some of this will depend on your plan configuration, right? So if your employees don't start their benefits until the month after they're hired, then you don't necessarily need to worry about new hires in December, but you will need to worry about them in November. They'll need to get both their 2020 and 2021 elections in, and you'll need a plan for monitoring those after your open enrollment window has passed. This is often a manual effort. There are some configurations that you can do to collapse events and to make it easier on yourself. So we're happy to work with you on that if that's something that tends to be a large issue for you. Again, it will depend a little bit on your seasonal activities, your hiring, etc. So have a plan for that. And you'll also want to have a plan for freezing your HR transactions as much as possible. Obviously, if someone has a salary change or a payroll change, we can't necessarily tell people to hold off on that. But if there's anything that you can put a temporary freeze on, such as maybe assignment category changes, or encourage your managers and your HR staff to get those in before open enrollment has started, that will make your life a lot easier. Typically during open enrollment, we look for HR transactions to be frozen as much as possible, which is why we want a tight window so that we can release those. But of course, inevitably, there will be some that need to go through, and you'll just need to have a plan for monitoring and working on those. And then throughout open enrollment, you'll hit other showstoppers, right? So if someone enrolls in a plan that requires EOI, you'll need to make sure that people are approving things and monitoring things in a timely manner so that you can close out the showstoppers before you run your vendor files. And this is where reporting will really be your best friend. We'll talk a little bit about reporting in a bit, but you'll want to audit for that, monitor it regularly, really every day. This can get very overwhelming if you wait until the end of open enrollment in order to clean out any showstoppers or go through those benefit elections. It will also affect your employees that perhaps decide to change their elections. If they've got something hanging out there, they'll be blocked from that. So just make sure you're monitoring and changing cleaning these up every day. And last but not least, we'll want to transmit our vendor files. And we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of auditing those in a little bit, but that would be our last step for open enrollment. In addition to, of course, doing that transmission, you'll want to then have a process for getting people over who perhaps have late enrollments because they're new hires, or perhaps have different enrollments because of qualifying life events that happen in the November to December time period, making sure that those get updated with the vendors and they get timely cards and enrollments as well there. All right, and let's talk about optimizing. So this is my favorite part because we get to talk a little bit about our consultant tips and tricks, things we've seen, ways that you can make it easier. So how to improve best practices for running open enrollment. So the thing that we find most people don't even think about is doing a review. You can do this right after open enrollment, but if you're just starting to plan now for this year and you've run cloud open enrollment before, you want to get together with your teams and maybe a selection of employees and managers to find out what worked and what didn't, right? Was the interface intuitive? Was the language intuitive? Were there enough plan documents so that people really understood what they were doing? Typically, we'll see some issues with handling overage dependents. Did you drop the dependent children over 26 years of age? Are you auditing for that data or did that sneak in? You'll want to look at your plan dependency rules. That's another one that we tend to see fall down in open enrollment. Was HSA and HDHP, was that validated? Did the dependencies for employee life to spouse or child life get evaluated appropriately? So again, putting in audits for that is very important. We'll also tend to see some issues when we come in to do cleanup around reviewing and optimizing your HSA FSA calculation rules, checking your coverage and rate start dates. We always recommend best practice using the seated configurations and pay period begin date as the rate start date, but we know various people or various clients have different configurations there. So if you have a different configuration, there might be some gotchas you'll need to look out for as well. And we're happy to help you take a look at that. The seated open enrollment email notifications. So again, we talked about this a bit earlier. These are available now out of the box, but they do need to be set up. The most exciting thing for this year is that the email reminders are here. So every year we were always asked, and we always have to do creative solutions to push out email reminders for employees who need to make elections or didn't make elections. That is all here now. So if you haven't read the documentation on that, I highly recommend looking at that on Customer Connect. We're also happy to point you in the right direction or happy to show you how to configure those as well if you're a support client of ours. That I think is going to make all of our lives a lot easier because it takes some of the communication heavy lifting off of the HR team. And another question to ask is how have you put in the Benefits Service Center responsive UI? So of course this release was released in, I want to say 19D. I know many of our clients have been implementing and enjoying the responsive UI across all of the modules, but benefits tends to lag behind, I find, just because people tend to not think of it until open enrollment. So if you haven't put it in and you're planning to use it for open enrollment, it's a good idea to implement it now before you get into open enrollment. Try not to be doing two things at the same time, just in case you do have some issues that need to be worked through with that. I will tell you, from the most part, I've seen these responsive UIs go in very, very easily and very well, as long as you have not created custom employee roles. And that's where there's some gotchas. And I know I've worked with a few of you on undoing some of that custom work that was put in originally. If you're using the seated employee roles, the Benefits Service Center should work very, very well for you. If you're not, then we might need to take a look at your roles and look at a path toward getting to seated, or at least getting the right duties and privileges in there. Okay. Audits. I know it's not a very exciting word, but I will tell you in all my years running open enrollments, audit reports saved me on multiple occasions. So you'll want to make sure that you have access to audit reports, that those are pre-built. You'll also want reports to show off what has happened, right? So management will also often ask us to report on what's our percentage of enrollments, how successful was our open enrollment, how many people actively enrolled, so number of employees who made explicit elections versus one who defaulted. Our timeline and our communication, we can report out just to see when people enrolled. We'll also want to look at defaulters, who defaulted and why. Make sure that we have audits for people who have let their HSA and FSA reset. That's very important. Checking on our coverage start dates. And honestly, the most important one is creating enrollment backups. So I'm sure those of you who live and breathe benefits know that 2 days after open enrollment, you'll inevitably start getting calls of, I made my enrollments, but they're not there, right? So it's usually the case that the employee did not go in, but occasionally, browser freeze, et cetera, something might have happened. So it's really important to schedule a daily backup of enrollment results of your employees, dependents, and beneficiaries. That way, if you do have a need to restore someone's elections, or if you're in the process of cleaning up, you void a life event in error, for example, you'll always have the latest backup. So make sure those reports are written now. We have a comprehensive reporting package I'll talk about that has many of those things. You'll also find some great reports out on Customer Connect. If you haven't gone out to the report sharing center, highly, highly recommend it, because typically most clients need to do the same audits every year. And it is a great idea for your management. Again, I like to allow HR to show off a bit, to create an open enrollment dashboard. So 2 dashboards, one typically for your benefits administrators to go in every day and see their statistics, right? How many life events are, having trouble, evidence of insurabilities, rate certifications, anything that's stuck or pending, or maybe causing a conflict, right? Conflicting life events or HR transactions that have gone through. You can monitor the health of your open enrollment with a dashboard. On the other side, again, HR showing off, you can create a dashboard for your management to say, here's how our employees have enrolled, here's how engaged they are in the system, this is what they're choosing, here's various sort of visibility into employees going into the system and the value that they're finding in their HR plans. All right, and for those of you who have, maybe this is your first open enrollment or perhaps are struggling with some resource, I do want to let you know about some support services that we can help you with, and I know a few of you on the phone are already utilizing these. So just some other things we can help with. We do, of course, offer comprehensive advisory and support services, as well as technical assistance. Like I said, the number one area we see some of these open enrollments have issues that come to us later is in rate loads and batch jobs. If you're not doing this every day, it can be very easy to get a little confused. So if you need some hand holding in that, obviously reach out to your CastleBridge consultant. We are very happy to put you in touch with Roshni or one of our other benefits experts who can walk you through those and give you a little hand holding. Obviously, we're happy to do your plan configuration or to teach you to do your plan configuration, since part of our core philosophy is really making sure that you feel confident navigating in the system and administering it yourself. And of course, if you have new vendors this year, we of course can help create those vendor files. We do work with most major vendors and have starting points for most. We also give you a full line of open enrollment packages, of reports and audits rather. We have a standard reporting package. I think several of you already subscribe to it, but of course we do have open enrollment dashboards and reports that we would be happy to help you with. Again, there's plenty out of reporting on Customer Connect, and I know many of you write your own, so take advantage of that first, but know that you do have packages that are available through us as well. And then we've also put together sample calendars for your simple, moderate, and complex requirements, along with an open enrollment plan checklist for what to do comprehensive before, during, and after. So if you need templates and just need a little guidance on the actual process of running open enrollment, reach out to us. We're happy to help with that as well. All right, with that, I think that gives you a pretty good overview of the actual process of running open enrollment. Again, if you need plan configuration help, Oracle does have pretty comprehensive guides, but we wanted to let you know the gotchas and the potential pitfalls, as well as the things that you can do to really give your employees and your HR a smooth experience. So with that, I'll open it up to Q&A. Again, if you don't mind just private messaging Roshni or put it in the chat in general. And Roshni, did we have any questions that were asked so far?
No, Jane, but we have like a few commonly asked questions. We can go through them.
Okay, great. So if we want to go through the common questions, and then if you think of anything or if we've missed anything, again, please feel free to message Roshni. All right, what common questions do we have, Roshni?
So one of the questions is like almost every open enrollment we face that with the clients is how do we extend the open enrollment dates by say a couple of days or two, and do we need to reprocess the life event for that? So the good thing is we have a seeded badge job provided by Oracle, and we can use that for extending the window for a couple of days for just specific set of employees. We don't need to reprocess the open event for that.
Nice.
And one more thing is about the action items. Sometimes it happens like there are a lot of action items and the benefit administrators, they are overwhelmed during open enrollment and clearing all these action items. So till the last year, there was no batch processes which could be used, but from last year OE, Oracle has provided a seeded batch job and a loader, spreadsheet loader, with a combination of both of them can be used to clear the action items on a bulk. So that really helps. And last year, some clients have used that. Another commonly question is how to mass update the rates. So we can definitely use the seeded standard and variable rates upload sheets. They are a lifesaver, I would say, during the open enrollment. So it's definitely a go for the open enrollment. And
Roshni, I know
also, like right now. Yep.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Jane.
I know you've previously shared that that's where we get a lot of pain points. What are some common mistakes people make with rate upload sheets?
So in the rate upload, it's the same thing what we see on the front end. So everything has to be same as what we exactly see there. The plan name. Sometimes it happens like people tend to misspell few words here and there, or just one alphabet, or an extra space is what we are saying. Like the administrators, they say like we are trying to upload the sheet, but the sheet is erroring out, and there is just an extra space. So while we create the template, it's really important that we are careful of every single word we are typing in there, using the proper effective dates, because these are really very important, using the correct dates, because once we pull in the incorrect date, it gets really tricky to put in back the effective date, especially. The future dated updates are really hard to handle.
Okay, so don't do that, guys. I think I've made every mistake on every batch spreadsheet I've ever tried to upload. So yes, thank you. All right, any other questions?
One more feature is, can we make election using the smartphones with the responsive UI? Definitely it's a yes, and a lot of people enjoy that. So excellent. It's a good thing to you guys. You can use your smartphones to do your elections.
Good, good. Yeah, I think this year is going to be unique, everyone, just given where we all are and the prevalence of remote work. And of course, everyone's thinking about their health benefits. So we're seeing a lot of success in our clients that are uploading or that are adopting mobile functionality as a whole, and benefits is no exception to that. So if you haven't already turned on that responsive UI, definitely think about it, especially if you've, adopted mobile responsive in the rest of the system. I think it's just becoming expected by employees that they can do everything that they need to do on their phone. So plug for that, highly recommended. I think Oracle's done a beautiful job with making that mobile functionality really intuitive. So definitely look into it if you haven't already. All right. Any other questions on the phone? Once again, we have recorded this. We are going to publish it out. I'm also happy to send the deck along to everyone who has participated, and the full recording will be out on both our website and our YouTube channel and a few other places. So we'll send you the links to that as well with the deck. But any questions before we wrap up? If not, I'll give you back 20 minutes in your day. All right. Well, thank you everyone very much for coming to the webinar. I hope you all have a very successful open enrollment. Please reach out to us if we can be any help or point you in the direction of any resources. And we hope to talk to you all soon. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.